Hey guys, this is Rez, and today we're gonna do a different thing. This time we're gonna design a layout that I drew for my students as an assignment. Okay, so it's a calculator layout, and all I wanted them to do is to draw it after they just learned all the layout stuff, such as linear layout, grid layout, etc., etc. Now, of course, I drew this super fast, so mind you, they're not straight lines, but see it as straight lines, please. And if you guys followed along my videos, you should be able to do this, at least close enough, okay? Um, you're gonna have some struggles, and that's the whole point of all of this. But if you want, you could follow along. Just make sure you understand every bit as I go along, okay? So the whole point of this design for my students was for them to learn how to design anything they wanted, well, with the base knowledge they currently have, and how to apply it differently than the norm or the fixed way of learning. And I also wanted them to look around for every widget or every item you see, the properties menu, where they have these things such as hint, which such as text and etc., or the gravity or the orientation or etc., right? So we're going to be doing both those cases. Now, let's start. There's a bunch of ways of designing, and one of the techniques I really like is to kind of figure out the overall boxes. Like, before even thinking of the smaller units, is like think of bigger boxes that contains everything in there. So here's a little demonstration. Well, actually, this is the whole point. Okay. So overall, we have this guy. He seems to be by itself perfectly functional. So you know what? He's gonna stick by itself. So him itself is the first box. Then we kind of see over here that it kind of looks like a whole button system, grid, and so forth, so on. However, there's some issues. Well, some parts are empty, and some buttons actually take 2, and some actually take 4, and it becomes an issue. So we're going to divide that to even more separate regions or cities or whatever you want to call it. So if you look over here, these guys are pretty constant. They're all the same size. They're in a sort of a grid format, and the last position is just missing. Now that looks nice. So overall here, I know this whole layout, without looking at the button specifically, it's a grid layout. Then I have over here another sort of grid layout, but we see that there's just 3 things and they're going downwards, so we could just say it's a linear layout. It's a vertical orientation of a linear layout, right? So every button will be placed right under each other, which is perfect. Then we have our last group, which is by itself, taking the whole bottom. Again, we could leave that in its own little box, which is just a button. Now, as we're looking at this, I wish I could draw on this. I don't know if I can't. If I can or I can't. Anyway, you'll notice a few things. Well, one, this is taking my whole width of my layouts. Secondly, these 2 components, the left, the grid layout, and the linear layout on the right, are right under this text view. And this linear group is on the right margin, or on the right of my screen. This group is on the left of my screen. And they both finish at the same amount, and they start at the same amount. So alignments, right? And the last start at the bottom and takes the whole width. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward to this point. I'm just analyzing things, by the way. I didn't do this yet, so we'll probably run into issues and we'll change as we go. I'm just thinking of all the different possibilities because I kind of have an idea-ish. And you could also see in between, we could and might have a margin, or if you want, maybe paddings in here, but we'll see how it goes. But for now, there might be a margin right here, right? Even maybe here, depending on your attitude. Okay, so let's go and start this. So again, we could go inside the this area, the palettes, and just go grab the widgets or items that we want, and just drag and drop, which is perfectly fine. If you tell me, I'm just gonna make this go on the top, and have that like that. And we could like, it's supposed to take the whole screen, right? We could go and we could just drag it and take the whole screen, but then issues with that is it does these unknown stuff, right? So here I thought it was gonna make the width match the parent, but rather than doing that, it's using this align stuff, which is interesting too because it kind of teaches us some new things, right? So align to the top, that seems amazing. We're gonna keep that. Align parent to start. Let's see what happens if we take that off. Aha, because align parent to end will go there, and because it's now aligning there, it's just gonna wrap it to the amount it requires. Okay, so if we take off align parent end, what happens? Well, now it just starts at the top right, top left. And remember, that's the basic rule where anything without any specific location, the default is always going to be the top left. And it's taking this amount of distance. This is not really wrap content, right? If it takes this amount of distance. This is because of EMS, which says it, hey, take the distance of 10 letters of M. So there's enough space there to put 10 M's. So if we replace the text here to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. A bit more, and I'm guessing the M's mean capital. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or not. This EMS is interesting stuff where it doesn't do what I normally thought it would do. But let's move on for now. So we're gonna just delete the EMS because what we're gonna do is rather than wrapping it, we're gonna say match to the parent, so it takes the whole top. And we're gonna keep that there for now. And we need to go in the properties. So here we're gonna go inside the design because sometimes as you're new, you don't know all there is, and you might not see something that you should, right? So the first thing we need to do is use a hint. 999.99 is our hint. So if we go there in the properties, we see the most used or the most significant for a edit text field, right? And if you look, there's a hint over here. Now, what is a hint? A hint is basically a toolbox, or it's a guide to the user to tell it, hey, this field should contain this. So think of username, passwords, where you want the person to type in the username in this field, but you don't want them to have the username as a text, right? You don't want them to have that as a value. You just want it to be there as a guidance. So that's where it comes in. However, we still don't see it, and that's because there is text in there. There's a value. Whenever there's a value, the hint goes away because you did the part where the value's in, right? So if we delete the value or the text in this case, the hint will show itself again and telling us, hey, this field is what should contain this. In this case, it should contain numbers, right? And then we need to also set the orientation to go on the right. So if we look inside here, do we see anything with orientation? We could also use the gravity, set it to the right. But there's also a text alignment, which is what we want. So we're gonna set it to the right. Perfect. And maybe later on we'll probably resize it to make this whole thing fit together good. On the disabled text for now, we're gonna leave it. We're just gonna move on. So let's go back to the text. So now that I have the numbers, we need to get this part going, and we said here it's pretty straightforward. It looks like a grid, so might as well add a grid. So I'm just gonna see if I forget anything. By the way, ID, let's change that to display field. Let's make it all capital. Display field. Well, camel case would start in capital. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a grid here. For now, we're just gonna do wrap content, and let's see what happens. So just to understand how it's going, I'm just gonna add the first button to figure out what's going on. Well, look, there's an issue. already that my button's overlapping with my text view, and my grid, if you notice, it's on the top left that it's starting. Well, remember, this is a relative layout. If you don't mention where it starts or where it is, it will always start at the top left. So we're gonna go and say precisely, I want this to be relative to my text field, which is called display field. So I want it to be under, right? So I'm gonna use the IntelliSense and start typing under and see what we get. Nothing. Synonyms for under, below. Hey, look, we found the layout below. Basically, tell the layout that I want to be positioned below my display field, right? And now it will go below it. That's perfect. Do you guys understand the whole point? So whenever you call the layout, it says, hey, whoever's the guy placing everything in this box, in this case it would be the relative layout, I want to be positioned below display field, which is my edit text. And you could see the arrow going towards it, right? And the edit text is saying I want to be below my top. So that would be align parent top true. Okay, so we have the first button. Let's just copy that and make it into a new button. Now we got a few problems. If we look over here, we have a grid with 3 columns and 4 rows. And over here we have only 1 row and too many columns. So we need to go inside the grid and set how many columns do we want. Columns count, we're gonna set that to 3. Perfect. And row count, for now we don't really need to care. We're just gonna keep adding it. It's always gonna be positioned to 3, so that's perfect. So we currently have 1, 2, 3 and 3. So 1 more row to add, right? So copy that, paste that, and we're gonna stop there. So I'm gonna get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 buttons, and we could go and fill that up. That should be pretty easy. Text, we're gonna put 7 for the top left, right? And go to the next one. Text 8. You could pause the video and just do this thing, which is annoying. So 7, 8, 9. Now we're here. 7, 6, 5, 4, right? 4. Text 5. Text 6. So if you notice, by the way, we're the way we're designing this is we're going the big layouts to the smaller layouts. Sorry, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we start with the general idea and we kind of figure out what is and what. Okay, and there's 2 ways of doing these things. One is doing the design way we did, which was to figure out the general containers and then go inside one by one, or to do the inside and then put them inside boxes and so forth, so on. Okay, either or is good, and I think you guys should vary between both, which kind of helps you out understanding stuff, and we'll talk about that more in a later video. But for the first prototype we're building, it's okay. So now we got this going. We obviously see that it's not taking the whole screen, and that's going to be an issue, but we could leave it aside till we get at least my right side and my bottom done, and then we come back to everything else. So that looks perfect. We got our numbers, and now let's add these 3 buttons, right? So again, right under grid layout, I'm going to add a new thing, and this time we're going to make it into a linear layout. I'm going to do wrap content for now. And we see that we still have the same issue where we doesn't know the positioning, so it's going to put it at the top. Well, we want it to be below my display field. We also want it to be on the right side of my grid, so let's put right. Let's go give a name. Let's go give an ID to my grid. So ID, and we're gonna name it num grids, right? Num grid or whatever. Okay. So, and we want it to be on the right side of my to right of my num grid, right? So there, that looks perfect. Let's try adding a button first, and we'll see if we need to change anything. So wrap content, and we're gonna add a text in there, and that text is gonna be big C. Let's add another button. There's only 3 buttons, so this shouldn't be too long. We don't need to copy paste too much. That one should be a plus. So we're doing this, by the way. Text plus, and the last button that should be wrap content, text minus. Okay, so let's look at your design. Aha. So first error, it's going this way, why I should go downwards. So if you guessed it, we need to set the orientation to vertical, right? So we needed to create rows. So that creates it downwards. Perfect. Now, other problem. Let's see. Well, it's attached to my num grid, which if you look here, we kind of have a distance, and it's kind of touching the edge of my screen, or at least that was my purpose when I did it. So you know what? Rather than saying it's to the right of this num grid, we could just say, hey, align it to my right side of the screen. So if we go here and we do align, we should see a bunch of different align parent right, and we're gonna set that to true. So now we see it's aligned to the parent to the right. However, because it's starting to the left of my what's it called, it's starting right of my num grid, it's taking actually more space than it requires. So maybe what if we remove this, right? Then it fixes. By the way, if you wanted to, you could also just say, hey, you know what, gravity, set it to the right, and that would push it, but there's still that distance which is gonna probably affect us later on. Let's not make them take more space than is required. So again, we're gonna remove that one, but we're gonna remove the to the right of. Like this, we kind of make it go to the right. Now, if we go back here, there's an issue. The C is actually taking 2 space while the plus and minus take 1. And if you notice, we could see that by the grid. And you notice that the bottom is the same. We're going to come back to why that's important. So we kind of need to set this to take more space. So if you remember, there's something we have which was weights. So we could set weights to each one of these things. And one thing we could do is set the weight to my C to be 2 times more than the weight for my plus and minus. So we're gonna go here and we're gonna start typing weight, and we see weight sum. We're gonna give it 4 because this should be 4 rows, and C should take 2, plus and minus take 1. So we're gonna come here, put weight to 2, weight to 1, and weight to 1. You'll notice that it's not doing much because wrap content, it says just takes X amount of space and that's enough. And secondly, the linear layout only goes so far. So it's still taking whatever space it requires, but to this point. So what we need to do is kind of stretch this to take a bit more, like that. That makes more sense. But did it do it for us when I say? Yeah, it did actually. Good, that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted just to align it to the bottom of that. So you'll see in a second as I remove the, so let's say layout height, let's make those 0 dps, 0 dps, 0 dps. It will automatically kind of fit them to be the same amount of height. or because it, sorry, let me explain this better. So when the grid divided everything, it divides it in perfect um, assignments because all the buttons are the same, right? But because we took the same size as my grid, we divided our whole content into 4. And then with the weight sum of 4, we took 2 rows for my C, and plus only takes 1 and minus takes only 1, right? So let me just show you, if I take off this align to the bottom, what happens. Well, because it's still taking 2, but it's just doing enough to wrap the stuff, right? So that you could see the plus and minus. That would be my default value of 1. So my C will only be twice as much as plus and minus, which we don't want. We want the plus and minus to be the same size as 3, 2, 1, 5, and all these other buttons. This is why we make it align to the maximum. So it kind of forces it to take this much space and divide that much space into 4. Okay? Anyway, so we got that. Let's go down. You know what? We're gonna just make these smaller. And if you notice, we should have 3 things. Oh, there's an error here. Let me just fix that. What's going on? There was no errors. Was there? Element button not closed. Aha. Must have erased something. Okay, there we go. So let's just minimize our grid. So we have our edit, our grid, and we have our linear layout. And now we need the last thing, which is the last button. We're gonna make it match the parent for the width. It's the last button at the bottom, and wrap content for the height. Again, you see it's stuck at the top right because there's no positioning. But this is the button we're trying to do, so you should take the whole bottom screen. So all we're gonna do is say bottom and see what we could get. Let's see, layout margin bottom, layout align bottom, layout align parent bottom, right? So we want to align it to the parent, which is our relative layout, bottom. And we're gonna set that to true. And you'll see our button is at the bottom, and we need to give it a text. Oops, that was the wrong. I'm using IntelliSense a bit too much. Text, and we're gonna set that to equal, right? Okay, so we got all our stuff. However, we're gonna notice something, that there's a big gap here and here, which is not great. So we kind of want to make all these things get bigger. Well, again, let's not go make it too complicated. We're just gonna go and make them sizes bigger and see how that works out. So if you go on the buttons, we kind of need these to be uniform, right? So all the buttons, and rather than making them a specific width and height, we're just gonna give them a minimum width and height. So if they take more, that's fine, but if they can't take less, it's kind of the idea. So we're just gonna start typing randomly. 40 dp seems really small. Oops, actually dp, not what we want. Let's double that. 80 dp, that looks not bad. Let's add a minimum height, 80 dp. Okay, that actually looks pretty good. Let's try that out, and we have to kind of play around with it later on to see how it goes. Okay, so I'm just gonna add 80 dp to all of them. You're noticing that one row is done. Still looks nice. There's a bunch of ways to copy paste to make your life easier. There's a bunch of other ways to actually do this too, but for now it's perfect. We just wanted to do it. You'll notice something, that my right location stretched with it, which was perfect. However, there's one issue. It's the width that doesn't match with these. The height matches it because it's taking the whole amount and dividing into 4, and because they're all the same size, it's perfect. Let's see, before we do that, we still have a bit more space, but we could arrange that later. So we need to go fix the width of these. So if we go to linear, to our linear layout over here, we said the width should wrap content. Rather than doing that, let's see. So we could make this match the parent. Let's do that. Match my parent. Match parent. And match parent. Still no good, but for the layout width here, the linear layout, so we don't have to repeat ourselves X amount of times, we're going to remove the height, but we're going to keep the width. So now the width is going to be the same, and the height's going to take it from the width. And we get this small space. Right? That actually looks pretty nice, to tell the truth. And guys, here I made the linear layout take the minimum width of 80, and the buttons to match the parent. So if the parent's always going to be 80, at least minimum, these are going to be stretched width-wise to whatever the parent is, which is really nice. Like this, I don't have to go around saying 80, 80, 80 minimum width, right? Okay, so that's good. Let's also fix the button at the bottom. Give it a minimum, which is pretty nice. Could be a bit higher in height, I guess. Maybe let's make it 90. I don't know. That's okay-ish. Let's sorry, I forgot one thing. We forgot about the edit text. So if we go there and modify that, it might just become perfect. So let's just type in size. There's the text size we could modify. Let's make that 20. Nope. 80. Way too big. 40. It's not bad. Not bad at all. Make it 30 maybe. Okay, 30, and we're gonna make that DP. Maybe a bit bigger actually. 40 DP. See how that is. Right? That actually looks pretty nice, to tell you the truth. And you see, this time we did the text size 40 dp because the edit text is wrapping to match, right? So the height, it's wrapping the content to match whatever it's inside. So as the size of the text gets bigger, the size of the edit text also gets bigger. And if you did that correctly, you get something like this. And if we look, we kind of get the same design, which is really nice. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. So I hope you guys could have done that on your own. Otherwise, try and try again. The more you suffer, the more you learn. This is how you become pros, and eventually you'll be the guys teaching everyone else, or teaching me actually. Anyway, this was Rez. See you guys in the next videos. Cheers. Ask any questions you have, and subscribe, like, comment, do whatever you like. Cheers, guys.